Cohiba is a brand for two kinds of premium cigar, one produced in Cuba for Habanos S.A, the Cuban state-owned tobacco company, and the other produced in the Dominican Republic for US-based General Cigar Company. The name Cohiba derives from the Taíno word for tobacco. The Cuban brand is filled with tobacco that comes from the Vuelta Abajo region of Cuba, which has undergone an extra fermentation process. Cuban Cohiba was established in 1966 as a limited production private brand supplied exclusively to Fidel Castro and high-level officials in the Communist Party of Cuba and Cuban government. Often given as diplomatic gifts, the Cohiba brand gradually developed a cult status. It was first released commercially for sale to the public in 1982. The U.S. Cohiba brand name was registered in the United States by the General Cigar Company in 1978, and cigars using that trademark have been produced for the American market in the Dominican Republic on a large scale from 1997. This Cohiba is related to the Cuban product in name only, containing no Cuban tobacco, and thus is the only Cohiba that can be sold legally in the United States. Cuban Cohiba History Cuban Cohiba's origins trace back to the middle 1960s, when a bodyguard of Fidel Castro shared some of his private supply of cigars made by a local artisan named Eduardo Rivera. These cigars pleased Castro so much that a special production of the unbranded blend, produced under tight security, was made for Castro and other top government officials. As Castro himself recalled the tale in 1994. "I used to see the man smoking a very aromatic, very nice cigar, and I asked him what brand he was smoking. He told me that it was a special blend, but that it came from a friend who makes cigars and he gave them to him. I said, let's find this man. I tried the cigar, and I found it so good that we got in touch with him and asked him how he made it. Then we set up the house, the El Lacto factory, and he explained the blend of tobacco he used. He told which leaves he used from which tobacco plantations. He also told us about the wrappers he used and other things. We found a group of cigar makers. We gave them the material, and that is how the factory was founded. Now Cohiba is known all over the world. The production of special cigars for top officials under conditions of tight security was given extra impetus by fears of ongoing CIA assassination efforts against Fidel and Raúl Castro and Che Guevara. The Technical Services Department of the agency is now in fact known to have worked on the development of exploding cigars as a means of assassination from the early 1960s. The Cuban Cohiba brand was formally launched in 1968 at the direction of Cuba Tabaco, the Cuban State Tobacco Marketing Bureau. The head of Cuba Tabaco asked Avelino Lara, head of the El Lacto factory, to create a new super-premium blend which differed from all previously existing Cuban cigars. During the first few years of production, only a few thousand boxes were produced annually, reserved for the use of high government officials and frequently given away as diplomatic gifts. The Cuban Cohiba brand was launched as a premium cigar brand into markets outside of the U.S. in 1982 in conjunction with the 1982 World Cup held in Spain. At the time of its first public launch, the Cohiba mark consisted of just 3 vitolas, the Panatella, the Corona Especial, and the Lancero. In 1989 3 more vitolas were added, the Robusto, the Exquisito, and the S Black Copyright Bandido. These first 6 are now collectively known as the company's Lane Clásica. In 1992 Habanos S.A. launched the first sizes in what it calls the Lane 1492, commemorating Christopher Columbus and his voyage to the Americas, with each size named for a century since Columbus' discovery. The initial launch included the Siglo I, Siglo II, Siglo III, Siglo IV, and Siglo V, with a Siglo VI added in 2002. Besides regular production, Habanos S.A. regularly releases limited-release Cohiba cigars for such events as the annual Habanos Festival, brand anniversaries, and their annual Edisa Cubed en Limitada release of special sizes of their various cigar brands wrapped in a darker vintage leaf. In 2007, Habanos released a new line of Maduro-wrapped Cohibas, called Maduro 5, in 3 sizes. The Cuban Cohiba brand also carries 2 machine-made extension cigarillos, the Mini and the Club. Habanos S.A. have used their Cohiba brand name for non-cigar products, manufacturing Cohiba cigarettes since 1987 and extra Cohiba cognac since 1999. In 1992 approximately 3.4 million cigars were produced in Cuba bearing the Cohiba label, out of a total Cuban cigar export production of approximately 60 million pieces. Tobaccos Cuban Cohibas have historically been known to use some of the finest cigar tobacco available in Cuba. The tobacco for Cohiba is selected from the finest Vegas finest o Primera in the San Luis and San Juan y Martinez zones of the Vuelta Abajo region of Pinar del Rio province. In 1992 just 10 carefully selected fields totaling about 700 acres were used for production of the Cohiba brand, their exact location a carefully guarded trade secret. The production of these fields is further selected for quality, with the output of just 5 of these fields used in Cohiba production in an average year. The tobacco used to fill the cigars is unique among Cuban brands owing to a special third fermentation in wooden barrels at the El Lagto factory, aimed at producing a smoother flavor than other cigars. Originally all Cohibas were made at the El Lagto factory, a mansion located on the outskirts of Havana converted into a cigar rolling school for women in 1961. Production of some Cohiba vitolas was later expanded to the Partagas factory in Havana, which manufactures its Cohiba product from pre-blended tobacco received from El Lagto. Cohiba cigars tend to be medium to full-bodied in flavor. Vitolas in the Cohiba line equals. The following list of vitolas de salida within the Cohiba mark lists their size and ring gauge and imperial, their vitolas de galera, and their common name in American cigar slang. The La Luna Classica series, Corona Especial, 6 inches a, 38, Lagto No. 2, a Panatella, S Black Copyright Dido, 7 a, 47, Julieta No. 2, a Churchill, Exquisito, 4AA, 33, Zone, a small Panatella, Lancero, 7 a 1/2 a, 38, Lagto No. 1, a long Panatella, 4 a 1/2 a, 26, Lagto No. 3, a small Panatella, Robusto, 4AA, 50, Robusto, a Robusto, the La Luna 1492 series, Siglo I, 4 a, 40, Perla, a Petit Corona, Siglo II, 5AA. 42, Malvan, a Petit Corona, Siglo III, 6AA, 42, Corona Grand, a long Corona, Siglo IV, 5AA, 46, Corona Gorda, a Gran Corona, Siglo V, 6 3/4 a, 43, Dahlia, a Lonsdale, Siglo VI, 5AA, 52, Core Plus or Minus Hornazo, a Robusto Extra, the Maduro 5 series, Genios, 5 a 1/2 a, 52, Estupendos, a Robusto Extra, Magicos, 4 a 1/2 a, 52, Magicos, a Petit Robusto, Secretos, 4A a, 40, Rays, a Petit Corona, the Bahike series, BHK. 52 ring gauger, 119 mm in length, BHK 54 band gauger, 144 mm length, BHK 56 band gauger, 166 mm length, Edisa Cubed en Limitada releases, double Corona, 7AA, 49, prominent, a double Corona, Sublime, 6 a 1/2 a, 54, Sublime, a double Robusto, Pyramide, 6AA, 52, Pyramide, a Pyramid, special releases, Millennium Reserve Pyramide, 6AA, 52, Pyramide, a Pyramid, Bahike, 7 a 1/2 a, 52, Bahike, a double Robusto. General Cigar Company's Cohiba, with the nationalization of the Cuban tobacco industry along with other businesses after the Cuban Revolution, many cigar makers fled the island and began growing tobacco in the Dominican Republic, Honduras, and Nicaragua, taking the brand names of their cigars with them. The Cuban industry contended that the brand names were the property of the nation, however, and parallel use of the same brand name resulted. Additionally, Post-revolutionary trademark uncertainty and a U.S. embargo against all Cuban goods made possible the relaunch of other Cuban brand names by private companies in other countries. The General Cigar Company, a private firm having no relation whatsoever to the Cuban cigar industry, first registered the name Cohiba in the United States in 1978 and subsequently began selling cigars under the Cohiba brand in that country in the 1980s. Manufacture and sales of General Cigars brand was significantly expanded during the 1990s cigar boom, with General Cigars product known colloquially as Red Dot Cohiba, owing to the red dot in the middle of the O in Cohiba on its bands and boxes. In response to General Cigars' use of the Cohiba name, Vuelta Abajo, the government-run company in charge of cigars, and half-owner of Habanos S.A. along with Altadis S.A., launched a long-running legal campaign to have General Cigars' trademark revoked. These legal fisticuffs were resolved on June 19, 2006, when the U.S. Supreme Court denied Vuelta Abajo's petition. As a result, the February 2005 decision of the U.S. Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which confirmed General Cigar Company unregistered trademark's exclusive ownership of the Cohiba trademark in the United States, is final. The General Cigar-made Cohiba cigars now have a disclaimer on boxes that they are not affiliated in any way with the Cuban brand. However, the United States government, in an amicus curiae brief filed in the Supreme Court, acknowledged that Vuelta Abajo could request U.S. government permission for judicial protection of the brand from the Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, which administers the U.S. embargo. Vuelta Abajo has stated that they intend to pursue this course of action. In a November 1992 interview, director of Vuelta Abajo Francisco Padre-Cubden indicated that in the event the American embargo of Cuban products were ended, return of the Cohiba brand name to Vuelta Abajo would be a prerequisite for any future distribution agreement with General Cigar Company. The first condition is that they must pass the brand name to us. This is the first condition. Immediately. If not, forget about it, Padre-Cubden declared. U.S. Supreme Court hands Cuba a victory over its cigars. February 25, 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to intervene in a long-running battle between a U.S. and Cuban company over the Cohiba cigar trademark. By refusing to hear an appeal, the country's highest court leaves intact a ruling in favor of the Cuban firm. Due to a U.S. trade embargo with Cuba, Vuelta Abajo cannot sell its Cohiba cigars in the United States while they are sold worldwide and in Cuba. U.S. company General Cigar sells its Dominican Republic-produced Cohiba cigars in the U.S. The legal dispute is over whether the Cuban company has the right to challenge General Cigar unregistered trademark in the U.S., despite the embargo, as reported by Agence France Presse. General Cigar obtained a U.S. registration for Cohiba in 1981 and a second registration in 1995. Vuelta Abajo had the trademark registered in Cuba in 1972. In the late 70s, it began registering the logo outside Cuba in 115 countries but was prohibited from selling merchandise in the U.S. by the Cuban Assets Control Regulation. In the case, Vuelta Abajo argued the CACR not only prevented the company from selling in the U.S., but also prevented it from challenging General Cigar's registrations. In June 2014, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit ruled in favor of the Cuban company by giving it standing to seek a cancellation of the registrations that block its own ability to register trademarks. The case will now move forward to the Patent Trial and Appeal Board. The challenge comes 2 months after President Obama announced in December that he planned to loosen some of the U.S.-Cuba restrictions, including the easing of the decades-long trade embargo. Under an easing of travel restrictions between the U.S. and Cuba, American visitors will be able to buy up to $100 worth of cigars and bring them home. See also, Cigar Brands, Cohiba. Footnotes. Further reading, Anne Rabati, The Cigar Companion, The Connoisseur's Guide. 3rd edition. Philadelphia and London, Running Press, 1997. Bernard Leroy and Maurice Safran, The Illustrated History of Cigars. London, Harold Stark, 1993. Minronne and Adriano Martinez Rios, Illustrated Encyclopedia of Post-Revolution Havana Cigars. Hong Kong, Interpro Business Corporation, 2003. Richard B. Perelman, Perelman's Pocket Cyclopedia of Havana Cigars. 3rd edition. Los Angeles, Perelman, Pioneer and Colorado, 2005. David Hall, The Cigar Nut, Cuban Cohiba Cigar History 2012. External links, official website of Habanos S.A. The Color and Complexity of Cuba's Cigars CNN, April 9, 2007, about Cohiba Bahaik Cigars Cohiba Smoke September 13, 2013.